Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In Unreal you have something called a plugin. But what is a plugin and how does it work? And that's what we're going to explore in this video is what makes a plugin, how it works, how it's built up. Because knowing this can really push your Unreal skill and knowledge just that little bit further and help you when you're in a bind when something doesn't work. So let's get started. So, we've all heard of plugins in Unreal, and every tutorial you go to shows you plugins in Fab, but what is a plugin directly? Well, I've got some example plugins here of the Asset Cleaner plugin and the Narrative Tales plugin here. Neither are sponsored, they're just the plugins I've got on screen at the moment. But a plugin is a type of file that you download and install to either your engine or to your project. And it gives you extended features, like DLC on a game. You download it, you install it. Typically, you use the Epic launcher to download these and then add it in, but there are other alternatives as well. So in here is my project for my main YouTube series, and you can see I have a plugins folder right here. This is how you install plugins locally. So outside of the content, which is where your entire game is built up, inside the plugins folder, you will install all the plugins you want to use. So you can see I've got quite a few now. Inside the folder for the plugin, you typically have a few files. Some of them are mandatory, others are entirely optional. The mandatory one is this uplugin file, which looks very similar to the main project's uproject file, but it's completely separate. This project here shows you what plugins it's using, what modules it's using, and it details everything about it. However, the uplugin describes how the plugin's built up. So it's what submodules does it have and what operating systems does it support, and then details of the plugin, where to go for help and all of the stuff like that. The key ones to note are the engine version, which is how you determine whether or not a plugin is going to work in your engine or you need to upgrade it. And then another one is the platform allowed list. This will either be at top level plugins, but it's rarely there. It's normally on specific modules like this. So you can see this plugin I'm looking at, Narrative, has 3 modules. 2 editor modules, so you can see it's got the word editor on the end, and then the standard one that is built into your game. So you can see the type is runtime, that means it's built into your game, whereas uncooked only means it doesn't bake it into your project when you build it. Every plugin will have a uplugin. If it doesn't have a uplugin, if it has a uproject, then it's not a plugin, it's a project. If it has neither, chances are you just need to paste it straight into your content folder. The next mandatory one kind of depends on what your plugin is. You will either have a content folder and / or a source folder depending on what your project is. So for example, in Narrative, we have both. In many other plugins I've seen, you typically have both. But you'll see in auto size comments, we don't have a content folder. Because just like an Unreal project, your content folder stores stuff you will use in your project or your game or the engine. So you can see in the Narrative content folder, we have icons we're using all the way around, and in the UI folder, we have the widgets and the stuff that build it up. Equally, if I come into async loading screen in content, we have some of the default loading icons to be used. The source folder is the C++ that makes your plugin run. And not all plugins have C++. Some of them are entirely blueprint based. I don't have any to show you, but sometimes you can get plugins that are entirely blueprint based and they won't have a source folder. And that's okay. But in the source folder, just like your Unreal project, you have your modules. So you can see we have the ones we saw in the uplugin, and then you have your code inside of it. Likewise, if I go into async loading screen, source, you have the same thing, the module, and then the code that builds it up. The next folder that you may or may not have, but you typically always have it if you've got a decent plugin, I guess, is the resources folder. This entirely is just what icons and other editor only stuff you will have for your plugin. I believe this is how Fab shows some things, but that's not 100% confirmed. It's just what I've been told before. and different plugins will also have a resources folder depending which ones you go into. Now this brings us to the next part, and that's the binaries and the intermediate folder. You very well may have been told before to delete these, but should you be deleting parts of a plugin? Absolutely. The binaries and the intermediate folders are recreated by Unreal when you build your project or your plugin. So if I come back to my main project and I just delete the binaries and intermediate folders, when I build my project in Rider or Unreal, it will recreate those. They are the built binaries that make it work for Unreal to understand what it is. And the same with the intermediate is anything that it will probably recreate often because it's intermediate, it's not permanent. So you know on Windows, when you write a program, you compile it, you get an exe file. That is compiling your code to an exe file. Equally, some languages don't need to be compiled, like Python, JavaScript, PHP, but in Unreal, it does. So the intermediate and the binaries are generated on the fly, and this is exactly the same for plugins. So you could very well come into your plugins and delete the binaries and intermediate folders, and when you rebuild your project, it will recreate those folders. There is a caveat to this, however, that if you delete the binaries and intermediate folders and add the plugin to your project or your engine, you will probably get an error like this, where it will say these are built with a different engine version, or they're missing, or something like that, with a list of your plugins, and you'll have to click yes to rebuild them. This is basically telling you that in your plugin that you've added, the binaries and the intermediate folders are either for the wrong operating system, the wrong Unreal version, or they just don't exist. So what I mean is if you come into this plugin and you see I'm running in 5.6, if I was to open this in 5.7, that message would show saying, hey, this plugin is for 5.6, are you sure you want to use it? We can try to rebuild them. That's all it means. This sometimes does work, I will admit it. I've had like probably 50-50 chance of this working. Most of the time, if it's a super basic plugin, it will just work. Unreal will compile it. Other times Unreal will throw a little bit of a fit about it and it won't like it. You'll have to build it another way. The most common ways of building it is to just bring it into your IDE, like Rider or Visual Studio, something like that, and just build it directly in here. So see, if I come into this narrative folder and delete the binaries and intermediate folders, if I come back to here and click build, as it builds, you will see it will start to compile the plugins, and this, there you go, it's automatically added the binaries and intermediate files back in. Perfect. Why would you ever delete them? Entirely depends how you get the plugin and what you're doing with it. Typically, as many of you know, I work for narratives, so when we're releasing an update, users will sometimes want the update earlier than Epic's 2-week delay time of them sorting it, so we send them the plugin directly if you want it early instead of waiting for Epic. And that doesn't come with the binaries and intermediate folders, it just comes with the content, resources, source, and narrative. You might think, wouldn't it just be easier to send you the binaries and intermediate? Well, no. Me personally, I do all my development on Linux, so my binaries for Linux won't work for you if you're on Windows or Mac, for example. Plus, the binaries and intermediate folders increase the size of the overall plugin massively because it's compiled code. So if I select everything here and check the size out, you can see it's currently 137 megabytes. It's not huge, but you can't send it over email. You can't send it over Discord. It's not big enough. Actually, I think you can if you have Turbo on Discord, but emails you can't send. It's big. If you remove the binaries and intermediate folders, look at the size now. It's 8 meg. That can even be sent via an email. And that's because you've removed the compiled code. You don't need it. You can just compile it yourself. The same goes for your project. You may hear a lot of developers who are using source control say they never check in their binaries and intermediate folders. Because it's a bit of a wasted space for everybody to just compile it themselves. So if I check the size of my entire YouTube project, you see it's 18 gig. That's a decent sized project. If I remove binaries and intermediate, you can see the size has gone down by 2 gig nearly, which is a significant amount of space that you're just paying for. And equally, if you get rid of saved as well, plugins don't tend to have saved, but saved is what Unreal does to save screenshots and saves. You see I've gone down by a further 4 gig. Quite a lot. So if you do receive a plugin and you don't have the binaries on intermediate, you can just try loading it up in your project. So go to your project, create a plugins folder, paste your plugin in, just run it, run your project. If you get the error, tell it yes, compile it. If your project loads up, good, it's done it, you're all good. However, if it doesn't, then that means it's one of the times Unreal's being a bit funky, so you need to just give it a helping hand. The easiest way is to just create a dead basic C++ project, even if you're not doing anything with it. Just create a basic C++ project in Unreal, and then put your plugin into it, just like we did before, and then hit compile, and it will run it. If it doesn't, it will at least show you the errors. However, sometimes you may not actually have your setup equipped for a C++ side. Maybe you don't have the IDEs installed, or you just generally do not know what you're doing. And that's okay, it's not for everybody. There is a link that I'll post in the description. We host it for the narrative plugin, but it works for anything. And it basically shows you how plugins are broken up and how you compile it if you need to. You see, we do say, just use a C++ project. It's far easier, and it is. But if you can't, then you can use the built-in Unreal tools to tell it to manually compile it. I don't know why Unreal has these different than the one when it tries to compile your project, but it seems to work. And all you do is you have to run your relevant command for your project and your plugin, and then it will work. So I'll post that in the description. I've got other videos on compiling that too. But that's pretty much plugins. I know for a lot of you, this might be, as the saying goes, teaching you to suck eggs, because it's something you've just known for years, and it is. But if you're just getting into Unreal, or you've never really thought about what a plugin is, you just go to Fab, click install, you use it. That's a plugin. It's super simple. And you are right in thinking a plugin is basically just a type of Unreal project, but as a U plugin. It kind of is. You can't directly load it up. You won't really get anywhere with it. But that's it. Yeah. One other thing I will show you, just at the end of the video, is quite often we always tell people, and I always tell people for any plugin, don't install it to your engine unless you've got a specific requirement for it to be in the engine. And what I mean by that is, by default, Epic will install all their plugins directly into the engine, almost extending your local Unreal Engine. So it will go into your engine folder, engine, plugins, and you'll have a folder in here called Marketplace, like that. And inside you can see I've got the narrative plugin directly inside this Marketplace folder. That is inside the Unreal Engine. So when Unreal loads itself, it will go to that folder. If this folder doesn't have the binaries and intermediate folders, you will not be able to use the plugin at all. It won't even ask you to compile it, it will just not load. But Epic, when they serve you a plugin, they automatically compile it in your version. If you're on Linux, it will compile it on Linux for you. If you're on Windows, it will compile it on Windows. Which is why if you download a plugin from the Epic Marketplace and go inside the binaries, it will have your binaries inside of it. However, if it's on GitHub or you are sent the plugin directly, that's not going to work. But also, we have had it in the past, and what appears to be happening again, unfortunately, is sometimes Epic glitches out. And instead of just giving you the option to update your plugin, they will forcefully update your plugin. What I mean by that is, if I come in and make a custom change to my plugin, which is something we highly recommend you do with narrative, customize it for yourself, make it work for you. You come into the content folder and change the UI. If Epic forcefully updates it, you're going to lose all those changes when it's in your engine. That's not good. You also have to remember to send this to every other developer you're working with. So if you've got a team of 1, 2, 10, 20, 50 people, and you add a new plugin in, if it's in your engine folder and they try to run the project, it's going to fail and say you haven't got this plugin installed, which is not great. You also don't have a backup of it. So if you back up your entire project here, are you always going to remember to back up the plugins folder inside the engine? Probably not. You're going to make mistakes. You're only human. So we always recommend you come into your marketplace, put the plugins that you're using. If there's other ones in there you're not using, don't move them. but cut it or copy it and paste it inside your project plugins folder inside there instead. Then when you back your project up, all the extra plugins are backed up. Epic can't forcefully update the plugin on your project. It's completely out of their sight, so they won't touch it. And it just gives you a nice peace of mind that if you have, say, 2, 3, 4 projects all using the same plugin, they can be completely isolated from one another. So if you go into one project and change the font, go into the other one, it won't have also changed for you. You might want it to, you might not. Now, I did say there were some plugins you're going to be better keeping in the engine. It kind of entirely depends on what you're doing, really. For me, I put every single plugin I download from Fab into my project, just in case. Even if I never ever plan to touch it, it's just safer. If that plugin releases an update that undoes a bunch of your work, you don't want it. And if you come back to your project a year later, you need to be able to get the old code back. So it's just safer. But one plugin I may do it for, if anything, is something like a C++ extender. So all this low entry ext plugin does is grab a bunch of C++ functions and give you a blueprint node for them, because there isn't one that's equivalent. So like you can sort a custom array, it gives you a blueprint node for it, that's it. Or auto size comments, all it does is in engine changes, it doesn't change anything to do with the game. But like you can see, it's still in my project. So that's a plugin, ladies and gentlemen. Super basic. I know this video's not had anything exciting. I don't think I've loaded Unreal up once. But that's something we need to know. Plugins are super versatile and you absolutely should be using them. But it's good to have that little bit of extra knowledge on how they function. I know when I started off in Unreal a few years ago, I didn't know you could add it to the project. I didn't know how they worked or what they did. But it's all there, all nice and easy for you. I hope this helps. If you've got any other suggestions for things we should just take a look at, let me know below. I hope this helps. I hope you have a fantastic new year, because I've just realised this video is dropping on New Year's Day. So I hope you have a great new year. Let me know your New Year's resolutions below. It's always fun to see what people come up with. My name is Decryption and I will see you in 2026.